I'm Cynthia Clory.
And I'm Nicholas Wilson. Today we're going to be talking about Grabby aliens. Well, and you know,
This could go either way.
All right, welcome back. Once again, I'm Nicholas Wilson.
Cynthia Clory.
And we have our very good friend, Michael McCane, joining us today.
Yes.
Welcome, Michael.
Welcome. We're so excited to have you as part of the show, especially for this topic.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to need you.
Hello.
All right. So I guess to get started here, we're specifically talking about a podcast by Lex Fridman, where he interviewed a man by the name of Robin Hanson, who developed, I believe with some other people, developed a theory about Grabby aliens, and it has to do with how aliens expand through the universe. Is that kind of how you guys took it?
Oh, yeah.
Yes. It's mind-bending.
It is.
I think you said.
We will do our best to try and explain some of it to coherency, but
Yes.
we'll see how that goes. This could go either way, I guess. Right?
Exactly.
Wait, I was supposed to understand this before we started?
Yeah, right. I had to watch it a handful of times. I mean, for anybody out there, if you want to see it, it's Lex Fridman, Robin Hanson. Type that into YouTube; it'll pull up. It's like a 4-hour interview. If you can go to the chapters, one of the early chapters is Grabby aliens. The whole chapter is about 30 minutes. About 17, 18 of it, they talk specifically about the Grabby aliens. So we'll give you a little taste. Hopefully you'll be interested, and hopefully Lex Fridman appreciates that we're promoting his podcast that he does not know.
Yes, and Robin Hanson's also appreciative. Yeah.
Expanding on his theory, I guess, or expanding the base for it. So I guess I don't know where even to begin.
So I'll try. I already practiced this with someone I know, and I was trying to explain it, and he was like, I don't know anything you just said. I was like, oh, crap. Well, there you go. So just giving you a heads up that I might mess this up. But so from my understanding of this, it was Robin Hanson, another group of a couple other people. He seems to be the spokesman anyway in this particular situation. And there's some other theory prior to the Grabby aliens, right? About the loud aliens versus the quiet aliens. And then Grabby aliens is a subset of just their theory on how civilizations appear and expand and the likelihood of us running into them at some point in the future, I guess, right? Is like a very
So
basic
what was your
version.
take on it, Mike? Is that kind of how you understood it?
Yeah, I anytime you get information, you start to mold it into your understanding. And so I kind of likened it more to ecological niches and how certain animals will outperform other animals that for the same resources. And thus, you have animals that will proliferate, and then in doing so, they will restrict the ability of quiet aliens to proliferate.
That's a good way to explain it. I like that.
There you go.
Because basically the loud. I took the loud and quiet aliens. Loud ones are loud. They go everywhere. People hear them. Quiet aliens don't expand and they stay close. But the theory itself, the Grabby aliens theory, is pretty wild. So essentially, the short of it is that once civilization gets to a certain point in time where we expand to the universe, we're already kind of at the beginning stages of that, right? We've gone to the moon. There's talk of going to Mars, and then we're obviously probably at the best several thousand years away from actually leaving the solar system as whatever level of intelligence that is. I have my own opinions about how that will happen, but so with Grabby aliens, it's because we're early, and eventually we'll expand so far that quiet aliens will no longer have the chance to appear because they will already be consumed by Grabby aliens. Is that kind of...
Yes.
All right, so we're on the same page.
I'm just going along with this because I did not choose this topic, but I am loving it. And I figured these two are going to be much better of a source of information. But I am going to play devil's advocate at one point during this conversation. But go ahead.
Honestly, I think it's my favorite idea of how aliens probably actually exist.
Oh yeah, this is definitely the first time. Like, I've always been a believer of the imagination being our greatest gift we've been given, and I definitely believe anything that we can imagine can be eventually. So I think this has just been the most like down to earth. Even though it's not, that's actually the very poor choice of words. But like, it's just the way of finally going, okay, this actually makes the most sense of it, because even talking about UFOs, you're like, yeah, whatever, those, they're probably a meth or whatever, who knows.
I don't know, man. I don't think. Well, I guess the fighter pilots could be. You know?
You never know. But either way, the point is, there's some, that, which I like the tie-in that maybe we'll get to with the UFOs, because I know that's what everybody goes to. I don't know, Mike, if you've experienced that, if you've told anybody that you're going to be, participating in this podcast and this topic, but every time I've mentioned it to people, they're like, "Oh, yeah, UFOs." No. And I'm like offended now that I know about gravity.
But yes, at the same time, though, right?
Yes.
Because recent uptick of what did they rename UFOs to? UAVs or
right? Unidentified aerial phenomena, UAF.
Okay, UAF. So the recent uptick over the last 20 years of UAF phenomenon, especially within the last 10 years, could be explained by the beginning of us being encountered by a Grabby alien civilization.
Well,
for better or worse.
Right, for better or worse. So what's interesting is that later, and I don't know how much of the podcast you watched, but he actually does talk about, they do talk about the UAFs and what Hanson's theory on that. And that's also very interesting.
Yes.
The short of that is he's like, well, if he's like, they're hard to explain. He's like, first of all, I'm not an expert on UAFs, by any means. I just want to make that clear. This is a very amateur opinion. But he goes on to talk about the panspermia theory of creation. Are you familiar with that at all, Mike?
Sorry, I must. My internet connection blanked out
No,
for a second.
good.
I think.
So the panspermia theory of the origin of life. Have you heard that before?
Oh yeah, definitely. It's where the original seeds of life came in a meteor or something like that.
Right. So he says it's if the stuff we've seen is actual extraterrestrial, that it's most likely a panspermia situation where the life that spawned us spawned another nearby star, and that life, that's why they're here already. Because it's like, if they were really grabby, they would be so far more advanced than even what we've seen, but they're likely maybe 100 years more advanced than us, but from the same origin seed. And then they decided not to be grabby, and that they're coming here maybe to prevent us from being grabby as well. Which is just interesting. He goes way into it. That's just the short of it.
I definitely think that's a wishful thinking lens to look at it. And, the other side of that coin could be that they are grabby aliens, and they know that the easiest way to take over our planet is to have these small, subtle changes that would eventually make it inhospitable for us, but more hospitable for them. So, maybe they're trying to come here and, teach us not to be expansive and colonial aliens or whatever, but also maybe they're trying to colonize us, and this is the
they would
first
have to be
tendrils of that.
I think they'd have to be early stage grabby aliens, though, because the whole theory of the grabby aliens is that they expand at a really rapid rate.
Where
and that you can notice environmental
see the spheres
changes
in
too,
the sky,
right?
and we would see everything. Like, we would be affected.
Stars.
Yeah.
So there was a star that was noticed over a 10-year period that had dimmed.
Betelgeuse, right?
Only reason that they can think of that is that a Dyson sphere is being constructed around that star. And of course, it could be any manner of other things that we don't necessarily understand because we only have an incomplete picture of physics. But there might be a Dyson sphere being constructed as we speak. That we notice, not just like an intangible kind of, maybe it's happening somewhere, but we've noticed a interstellar phenomenon that would say that Dyson spheres are being constructed.
It's fucking crazy. Just the fact that a Dyson sphere in and of itself.
You should probably explain that to the audience.
Michael, I could only give a very vague explanation. So
it was proposed a while, I think in the 70s, that as a civilization starts to break away from its original planet, that they'll learn how to harvest energy directly from the sun. And then so they'll have satellites that basically go around the sun and then beam energy back to Earth somehow, or back to original planet somehow. And the Dyson sphere is just kind of like an expanded version of that, that after one satellite.
I fucked it up, but we were recording.
You weren't recording any of that?
We got it on Skype, though, so we'll be fine.
Oh, okay.
We got it on Skype. We may have missed the
And
intro,
so,
we'll
like-
have to redo or something, but we'll be okay.
Okay, we'll redo that at the end.
Sorry, I didn't mean to
Eventually-
interrupt you.
Oh no, you would eventually keep adding these satellites that collect this energy until they kind of link together, and then at a certain spot you would start preventing outward luminescence of the sun to the point that you could actually notice it from other solar systems. And eventually they would propose that you would completely encapsulate your sun to be able to collect all like 100% of its energy. You know, I think 1 or 2 satellites is most likely like inevitable. You know, we'll figure out how to collect energy directly from the sun and beam it back with like fairly high efficiency, but an entire Dyson sphere seems kind of like a pipe dream to me. Like, how long would that take? How much resources would you have to be able to collect to even be able to construct half a Dyson sphere, let alone an
Well, you have
entire
to collapse
Dyson
like a
sphere?
whole solar system, pretty much. Of
Yeah,
planets.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like,
But that's,
Reminds me of, like,
but
you
that's
know-
at the level of Grabby aliens, though, right?
Yeah.
Like, if they're moving
if
stars,
they're moving stars and,
then they're
and at
probably
that and,
moving that. You
and
know?
they're what, millions of years advanced from us as well, if that was happening right now.
potentially like a billion years.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of the idea that I took from the video, is that it's essentially, give or take, you know, several 100 million years, about a billion years, to get from intelligence to grabbiness.
Yeah.
And so because everything's so spread apart, we're at this position where we could potentially be successfully grabby, or we could be overtaken by grabby aliens before we get the chance. So we're at this like cusp being potentially almost loud and getting, and getting it, because it just depends on how close the other grabby aliens happen to be. So I guess we can get more.
So yeah, so I'm backing up. I feel like
You're
we
going down on
should
too
go.
many tangents.
No, that's okay. I think that's good. With this type of topic, it doesn't surprise me we're going to go on crazy tangents. One, yeah, we should back it up so people kind of understand what the parameters, the 3 parameters that
They describe
a grabby alien, and what is it? Well, like how intelligent life expands and distributes in the universe, and what it's going to predict, right? So just kind of going over, I guess, some of those things. So from my understanding of my notes, so there's 3 parameters. And I watched, and I will say, I'm going to give another shout out to another source that I got information from. They're called, Rational Animations. And they actually put together, they're on YouTube.
That's the one you sent me?
Yeah, that's the one I sent you.
too.
Yeah, so that
oh,
one.
that was really good. Yeah.
Yeah, they were really good. So if you are like, your mind's starting to go, what, I need to learn more, that's another one that was good for much, as complex as this is, it helps really, bring it down to layman's for, with animation. So they go into, because you had the more descriptive version of the parameters and I had the more dumbed down. Like, what were your 3?
Mine are, I actually think yours are probably
Okay,
better notes.
so-
'Cause mine's just like 3 short lines. It's just notes.
So, 1, they expand from their origin planet at a fraction of the speed of light. 2, they make significant invisible changes wherever they go, hence the Dyson sphere like we were just discussing. And 3, they last a long time. So these aliens are civilizations that, obviously, if they're at this point, they've been around, like we were just mentioning,
Well, and that's
much longer.
and that's what we talked about. Meeting the hard steps
Yes.
of becoming civilization. I think that's how they kind of came up with because they came up with a rate of about 1 per million galaxies that may create grabby aliens, and so they came up with that by looking at the hard steps we had to pass to be able to successfully evolve into intelligence that may want to expand. And so those are kind of the hard steps that they created this theory. And so basically what that also has to do with is that by reaching this point, we're very early in the grand terms of the universe. So that is also another reason that grabby aliens can expand. I don't know. Every time I talk about it, I then start to lose myself in it. I'm like, wait, I just don't understand why that makes sense.
I don't think anybody even at the end of this, other than Robin Hanson and a few hands of others, even I think it's probably at the end of the whole thing with Lex Fridman, he's probably like, all right, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, the one part I got out of it was that the vast majority of life will appear much late. Like if there was never any expansion, the vast majority of life overall would appear on longer lasting stars because the overall probability of hitting those steps increases with time. So if no species expand, then the vast majority of life would happen later. And so that's why they say that we are very early. I don't know. Do you have any way to clarify that, Mike? Or is that...
What I took from it, so I went an interesting route. I did watch the video that you had sent me that was like a condensed version of it, but I actually went and read the paper that he published last year.
Oh, nice.
And so from what I understood, he was saying that the Earth is only about 0.4 billion years old, and that we've already come to the point where we're sentient, intelligent, and we have an understanding that we could and need to leave the Earth. And then he also kind of says that the estimated life left in our planet is about 1.1 billion years. And so he was saying that, like, based upon that, we've come really early. But something that I didn't find him to talk about was that planets and solar systems that are closer to the center of the expansion of the galaxy are drastically older than ours. Like, we weren't even created when they were halfway through their entire lifespan, or the solar lifespan. And so it's completely possible that Grabby aliens could have existed closer to the center of the universe and already completely burned themselves out. Or I guess the whole point of Grabby aliens is that they're expanding so that when their original planet dies, the original solar system dies, that they continue. But it's... So he's saying that, like, from what I understood of it, is that we're really early in lifespan based upon how the lifespan of our planet, and that he's also comparing it to the fact that, like, our sun should burn out in another billion years, but there are suns that are proposed to go on for like 1 trillion years and stuff like that.
Right.
And so he's saying that, like, based upon that, we've come really early for our solar system and our set criteria, but there might be other aliens that will have a drastically longer shot at becoming Grabby aliens. Because, like you had said earlier, based upon his, like, if we take everything that he says is gospel truth, that we have just about 1 billion years left to get off this planet before it completely burns up. And he says it might take us another 1 billion years to get past all these hard steps to be able to become a spacefaring civilization that spreads beyond its own solar system. And so, gosh, now I've lost myself.
Jeez, it happens.
It's such a deep topic.
Yeah, and the only thing I could say,
just to give
that was a pretty good explanation.
That was a very good explanation. Thank you for being here today, Mike.
I knew I was gonna be happy you were here.
I know, me too. When you told me you're going to be on the show, I'm like, yes, we have a chance of making sense of this all. No pressure. As one of the things, I don't know, I think I was mentioning it to you, that listening to all this and understanding that this very well could be a very real thing, that either there are potentially already quiet aliens in the other civilizations that are existing, and we're here, and we're like an unlikely situation, really, for the scheme of how long Earth's been around, and from the moment life appeared to where we are now now that he talks about it, it is actually really incredible how fast we're moving. But it makes me think of the show, The Orville. Have you seen that show, Mike?
I've seen at least the first 2 seasons, I think.
Yeah, like
the first season's
the best.
It gets a little whatever. It starts making fun of itself later.
Well, I feel like the first season they were really, like, it was really making fun of itself, making fun of, like, they were obviously like spoofing Star Trek.
Oh, and then they got super serious. Yeah,
right. And then it got then it was actually trying to be Star Trek, I felt like, later on.
Like, they were trying to be more serious about what they were doing, as opposed to, like, they were just constantly making jokes about, like, how ridiculous what they were doing was.
Yeah, I know, it was great. The point is, though, I really appreciate that Seth MacFarlane might already know about all this, and that's what he based the whole show off of, is the fact that there are all these other civilizations that are expanding and trying to make sure they stay alive,
they
and their
do faster
planets
than
are
light
habitable.
travel. That's the thing that separates them, because in this thing he talks about because Fridman brings up, well, what if, so the whole thing was, so back up a little bit, I guess the whole thing is that one of the big parts is that
why don't we see them? The whole question about why
we
don't we see
the
them?
aliens yet because they're traveling really fast, right? And so as they approach the speed of light, the time between the light and them getting to us shrinks. So the faster they are, the longer it takes us to see them. Because once the light hits, they get here immediately. And if they're going slower, it takes them longer, right? But then, so then Fridman asks, well, what about, like faster than light travel, like warp speed, whatever. And he's like, well, I mean, I have to take Hanson's word for this because I don't know any better. But basically, if you're able to travel space and time, then you can travel forward and backward in time. And so then they would already be everywhere.
Yeah. Right. I mean,
I don't know. I'm not enough of a cosmologist and physicist to understand enough about space-time to question that in any way.
Yeah. I mean, when you say it, it kind of would make sense because if they could move that fast. And then, so that was the thing about where if they are moving at a fraction of the speed of light, then what would happen, right, is we would start seeing these giant spheres of light, which are the ends of the beginning stages of us seeing the civilization as they're slowly approaching because they're actually moving a fraction of the speed of light.
Well, their estimate right now is a third the speed of light is what they are like. If Grabby aliens have based off of all the parameters they've come up with, and that there are likely Grabby aliens that exist that are moving at least a third the speed of light.
What speed are we moving?
0.
We are.
Dang it.
That's
not good
at all.
Yeah, that's true. We're barely touching the moon.
That goes
and then there's still people don't even believe that really happened.
And that goes into how do we really expand through the universe? I personally don't believe that we will ever be a fully biological species or what have you that expands through the universe. I don't think that's possible. I think that we'll expand through our intelligence, whether it's through some sort of AI or cybernetics. I don't know if that's what you would call like cyborgs or what have you. I don't think it's pure biological beings that we would be able to survive and expand. I mean, expand through the universe at a third the speed of light. I mean, that's insane.
We're not even sure if our chromosomes would properly separate during
Ours, right?
Yeah, meiosis or whatever. So it's like, could we even push generations into space? Because that's what you would initially need, or essentially need to be able to travel to another star system, is a spaceship large enough to where you could just host 100 generations of people. And I think we talked about this previously, that once that 100th generation gets to the other solar system, what kind of connection do they even have to Earth? Are they even human anymore?
Right. It takes years to communicate because it's just, you get light years away. So that's every light year away is a year of time to 2 years of time to communicate because it has to go there and back.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's if you figure out how to communicate with lasers over long distance, because as far as I know, that's the fastest method of communication. But the only way to get it to the moon is to do an expander. And so you can get a couple 100 million miles at most through laser communication.
Right.
But
right?
Yeah. So how long would it take, and would it even be possible to communicate with a solar system, at least through our current understanding of physics?
Which I think he talks about that when they got on the UFO or the UA, whatever they're called now.
Right.
The politically correct version of that.
UAFs.
UAFs.
UFOs is, has the connotation,
Well,
of kooks.
Exactly. That's true. Well, they were talking I think Robin Hanson mentioned that when they were discussing that if you, just from what we're talking about, the fact that would we even be able to communicate and stay connected as we expanded in what from the those planets we do see in our solar system here, we would have a tough time communicating, let alone these other civilizations that if they are traveling to here, they're so way beyond us. Would they even be able to communicate with us, and would we be able to even understand each other at all?
That's why I was talking to you. One of my favorite people to read about is Ray Kurzweil. If you haven't heard of him, he's a futurist. He basically made a bunch of technological predictions, and more than half of them have come true. His skeptics put him at 75%. So even his detractors, he's pretty good. So his belief is that, when the technological singularity happens, right, that means we'll have viable nanomachines and we'll have computers capable of handling strong AI. And so that basically the ultimate goal of our intelligence will be to expand through the universe, but will expand as like nanomachines and technology, because he sees technology as actual biological evolution, that technology is our next stage of biological evolution that we create. And
So that he sees
the
it
integration between biotic and abiotic.
yeah, and every bit of technology we create is a part of our evolution, and so that eventually we'll just download our brains onto some sort of synthetic medium, and then nanomachines and whatever other tech is how we'll actually expand through the universe at whatever rate is possible, whether it's half the speed of light, right at the border speed of light, what have you.
Yeah.
Or if we're the only one, or maybe we are the ones that discover faster than light travel, and we're the only ones that exist. I mean, that seems unlikely, but it's.
Improbable.
I can't say it's not possible.
Because they talk about like the cancer model in there. Well, they relate it to the hard steps, which we haven't really talked about too much. But
right.
And they're saying that like for a cell to become cancerous, it has to go through several different changes that are actually pretty drastic, and that statistically it's not very likely for a cell to do that, but because you just have so many cells in your body and you're continuously making them, that at some point you will make a cancerous cell. And so I thought that was a really interesting argument for the vastness of space and the existence of aliens, and that sure, it's pretty unlikely, but you have like an unlimited palette or unlimited canvas to paint this on, so it's
right. And then over
unlikely
time,
for a single.
Yeah, it's unlikely for early, and then over time, it only increases, right? Because there's just been more instances of the possibility. That's why cancer the cancer still works, right? Because then you're more likely to get cancer as you get older, because the chances of that replication failing increase the more replications you have. Yeah, the hard steps, I couldn't find like a list of the hard steps because I wanted to bring them up. I couldn't find a list of them though.
So
go ahead, Mike.
Oh, I was just going to say, so like the hard step seems to be a rebranding of, are you guys familiar with the Great Filter hypothesis?
They brought it up, I think.
I've heard it mentioned, but that's
they brought it up in that.
It's basically saying that like if 1,000 civilizations, sentient civilizations are wrapped around the universe, how many of them would actually become spacefaring, and then how many of them would be able to go to a different planet, and then of those, how many would be able to actually leave their solar system? And so this was actually written by Robin Hanson as well. And so he was kind of saying that for a civilization to get into space, to actually like inhabit space, they have to pass through some sort of cutoff that seems to prevent most civilizations from getting there. And he didn't really have an explanation as to what that cutoff could be or what the Great Filter is. And everybody kind of has their own ideas of what it could be. I definitely have some ideas for it. From what I took from it is that like his discussion of the hard steps is kind of a breakdown and rebranding of his earlier idea that like there are certain things that need to happen for you to be able to do this. And in this one, they kind of mention hard steps, but it's more of like an amorphous term to relate the idea that we have changed from a single cell organism into a sentient being with like hands that we need to grasp things. But what's really interesting about, oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
All right, continue.
I was going to say what's really interesting about this hard step idea, especially when you relate it to the age of our planet, 0.4 billion years, is that every hard step that we've gone to get through here has been forced upon us by nature. It's been selective pressure. We have done nothing except exist. But for us to be able to get into space, every single hard step from here on out is something that we have to think of, create, and then fix to be able to get past it.
And choose,
and I just don't see us doing that.
Choose, yeah.
Wow. Well, you don't believe we could do that?
I agree with Mike. I think a lot of what it takes is a more global continuity. Like because there's too much like personally I've long thought that the U.S. is very likely to get left behind by the singularity itself because of a lot of concepts of morality and what have you. We're unwilling to accept a lot of new things at the rate other places are. And once you hit like something like the singularity, it's a singularity.
Yeah.
Like if you don't go along, you are left behind,
Yeah.
and there really is no coming back
Yeah.
from that. And I think I honestly think that like how we view countries like Afghanistan and the tribalness of those undeveloped nations is that's what we're going to be viewed as, and we're going to end up eventually, maybe not in our lifetime, but I think that we'll end up as basically like a warlord type nation because we will fail to adopt.
All right, well, I have a little bit more faith in humanity. I mean, I have a little more that which is why when you bring up the next stage of evolution is technology, right? And the nanos and all the bots and all that stuff. So I get that, and I'm sure our audience does too. That's why it would make sense if we were to actually get to that point as a entirety of our world. I feel like truly the next step in evolution prior to that has to be the evolution of our mind and awareness that we are all connected as one, and that's the only way if we're gonna survive and become Grabby and do all that. We have to do it as a singular unit with the entire world, as many as we can anyway.
And make these choices, right?
Yeah.
It would have to
be that awareness of the mind to get past a lot of the bullshit. The good news is I feel like we're on that train because the fact that there's so much information available to us now, it's starting to show that a lot of this shit doesn't matter. And I mean, I'm starting to see that. Now, how long that's going to take other people and how many generations this might take to catch it up, but I don't know. I believe that it's a chance that we could.
I certainly think there's a chance we could. I think we're capable as beings to do so, but I mean, did you ever watch the Animatrix?
No.
So did you watch it, Mike?
Yeah, really good.
So
the origin of the Matrix, they go into that story, and basically the AI were super friendly and wanted nothing but just to exist side by side, and the humans could not handle it and just
recognized them, right? Because they tried to join the UN several times and stuff, and they were just laughed at, like.
Yeah, and so they went into like hide in their own. They would take like a shitty spot of land and tried to just exist there, and then we nuked them. So like, I think that is, I just maybe we'll have a great awakening of consciousness at some point. Maybe, I mean that would be wonderful, but I think that just when I look at specifically even the U.S., that our approach to so many things is just not compatible with that idea of global unity. But I mean, Hanson himself talks about that like competition is essential to becoming Grabby as well. Though.
Yeah, because if we're all singing Kumbaya and everything's happy, we have no reason to continue to expand. Now, if you like, there is evidence that we are expanding. I mean, just the fact that we've created the ability to have all the information at all times, period, to pretty much the entire world is a form of spreading. And I would think that's what was coming to my mind, is that's a form of grabbiness, that suddenly we went from just buying things locally and, working and trading and doing those things together. Now suddenly we can shop all around the world. We're advertising to everybody around the world. And believe it or not, that is, I think that's a very, 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 very early stage of what this guy's talking about. And the fact, a couple things. The fact that, again, this is where I was saying I was probably going to play a little devil's advocate, but like the fact that we even are having this conversation is a form of,
and that we even,
that's one. And then two, the fact that like this Animatrix thing you mentioned, that people are starting to outline, hey, this is a potential based on where we're at, where we could go. So becoming aware of that, we could still make a different choice from that.
Right.
You know
Awareness is the first step.
Yeah.
Really understanding.
I actually think that our great filter, at least the first one of many probably, is that the inequality that exists on Earth, that you can even go from in a single state from a city to a neighboring city and see drastic inequality in quality of life. And I feel like once we are able to figure that out as a planet, or if we just wipe everybody out, I think that's the easy answer. But the real answer is once we all kind of start working together and form a global consciousness, which is, taking place currently. but we're leaving certain parts of the world behind purposely or accidentally. I don't know. But once we do that, I feel like that's when we'll pass our first race filter. And that without that, we'll just be wasting all of our resources and time fighting each other and killing each other for nothing, really.
Oh, I'm a big believer that strong AI is the only chance humanity has to really survive. That people are afraid of it, but ultimately, like, we have so many issues that we just can't rally. We need global, efforts together to work on, like, climate change. I mean, like, whatever you believe about climate change, I'm not going to get into causes or whatever. Climate is changing. Nobody really argues that the climate doesn't change, whether it's on its own or human caused, right? Climate does change. We have to prepare on a global sense for that change, regardless of who's caused it, because that's how we're going to survive. If we have polar ice caps melting and there's massive flooding and we're not willing to work together to save all the people that will die or potentially die from that or starve from the lack of food, the lack of arable land and things like that, then that's going to be a big test. And I think AI is really the key to answering questions about climate change, like providing solutions to either fix or prevent what issues we are having. And then the potential for higher consciousness, I think, also will probably be tied to the singularity as well. And it's whether you're an adopter or not. And that's my fear, is that if there are too many non-adopters, that there's going to be a struggle.
Well,
and a breakaway civilization too, right? Because non-adopters will be opposed by people who readily adopt it.
Right. And how does that play out? If the adopters are a significant minority and there is enough fear among the non-adopters, I mean, that's where you could end up with big time destruction.
Right. I mean, I would say it's probably going to be, I feel, believe it or not, that the worldwide pandemic we just went through, there's plenty of people that act like it didn't fucking happen.
Good for the future.
Well, no, I feel like we didn't do so bad as a whole getting through that. It went to shit a little bit, but not like full on shit.
I completely disagree.
Yeah,
I feel like
coronavirus really
wasn't that bad. Like if it was something like Ebola at the same infection rate as COVID, where you're losing like 50% of the people, that's something that you would have to test about rallying around. But this was less than 1% fatality rate.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I feel like it was maybe a little teaser that somehow we were given.
Yeah, and it showed us we fucking suck.
We have a lot of space to work. If Ebola was going around instead of Corona, you literally would see people on the street spewing blood out of their mouth, almost about to die, telling you that it's all a government lie.
Yeah, that happened in West Africa. People were literally dying of Ebola, and then I was watching something just about it, and then a nurse, someone who claimed to be a nurse, comes out, says, "We've all been lying to you. They're just cannibals. There is no Ebola. They're all lying to you. There is no Ebola." And then there were fucking riots.
But this is where it's now. I think these are good hard steps. I think this is probably a form of a hard step.
Failed hard steps in my.
We're getting there.
But you have to fail. We're getting there. But there's many failures before a success.
But what have we learned from it, and what have we done to prepare for the next time? Which is nothing.
Nothing. But that's because we're still in the middle of it. I still think what this is doing is it's starting to help people recognize
you have a very positive outlook.
Bullshit from not bull. I do, but again, that's not a bad thing because I have.
No,
to.
it's true.
I want to have faith that we're gonna figure this shit out because I don't know. It's so ingrained in us to survive and grow that those that don't want to survive and don't want to grow, that's just another form of the selection process that I just am going to rely on, that those people are just going to fade into nothingness because it's just innate that we have that drive,
I think the real test for whether we can expand as a species or not is how we deal with multiple organizations and governments expanding through the solar system. Are we able to distribute resources fairly, or is it going to be first come, first serve?
Socioeconomic status,
or is it going to be like first come, first serve? because that's good. I think that's going to be a big test, right? Because if we're able to manage these resources, for lack of a better word, because I hate this word, equitable way. if we're not able to do that with the solar system resources, then I just don't think we have a chance of coordinating enough to become truly Grabby.
So I definitely agree with that, but I find the problem would be, so jumping back to the Ebola in West Africa and how that bad faith actor came out and was like, no, they're all cannibals. It's really easy for certain people to believe that they're being taken advantage of because historically they've been taken advantage of a lot. And so I feel like I just lost the thought. Schnikes. It was a good one, I promise.
It's okay. It'll come back to you. Don't worry. If it was meant to be. No, I was just gonna.
That's if you can manage the socioeconomic issues,
yeah,
so that people don't feel like they're being taken advantage of. I think then you do have a better chance of getting the coordination right. It's the separation of wealth that is really, I mean, it's the driving factor right now in the U.S. Right? If there wasn't such a drastic difference in the wealth steps now, and there was much more mobility, so that you could move up more easily, then there probably would be significant less discontent. Because if you have what you want and you have what you need, then what do you really have to be upset about? At a certain point.
It did come back to me. I do agree though that like, and I feel like that's what I should do is ADHD, focus on one thing, not jump around. So because people have been like abused for so long, it's going to be really hard to convince everybody to join together and work collectively, and that they're not being taken advantage of by other people in that group. Have you guys ever read the book Sirens of Titan by Kurt Vonnegut?
I have not read that one.
No, but we will write that down.
Definitely recommend it. So in the book, he basically outlines everything that's wrong with planet Earth and why we can't get along with each other and why essentially we'll all die here because we'll kill each other here. And then he also outlines the best way, the quickest way to get everybody on Earth to band together. And essentially in the book, I won't try to ruin it for you if you're planning on reading it, but a very wealthy person is completely devoid of all happiness. They have everything handed to them throughout their entire life. And because of this, they hate life, they hate themselves, they hate everybody. They just are discontent. And so they find this person who is like, through whatever reason, he can see and he knows everything. And so it occurs to this guy that the only way to keep everybody from dying on Earth as a species, not as individually, is to fake an alien invasion, and then everybody will rally against the outside invaders, and in doing so we'll realize that we're all kind of like, we're on a very tiny ball in this massive ocean of nothingness, and that without banding together we'll be more susceptible to other things that can destroy all of us. And in that, I found that that's probably the most beautiful way to describe what's wrong with humanity, and also a way to get us all to band together, is we just have to fake an alien invasion, you guys.
Yeah.
Well, maybe that's what somebody's trying to do with all these
maybe
UFOs
that's what
or whatever.
Up to with all this UAF stuff is they're trying to
UAF. I need to write this down.
Right?
Yeah, I mean,
it doesn't stick.
It
It sounds like a poor
good
band from the
UFO.
90s that just wants to talk about the beach.
Right.
Like,
It makes me think of Weird Al as in his movie UHF.
Oh yeah.
oh yeah, love that movie.
The other dial on the old TVs for the young ones out there, you won't know of
Now
those
they know
TVs
how old
that
we
go
are.
click, click, click.
Now they know how old we
Have
are.
like 8 channels. And you gotta switch to UHF so you can get those high channels.
So I was gonna say something, but just like you, Mike, it slipped my mind. I'm sure it was
Dead
important.
air. Sorry.
I think we've covered most of what we wanted to talk about. I mean,
Okay, well,
clearly
there-
we didn't explain anything at all. But
well, I feel like we know. So okay, there's the big one that I know. That I'm just gonna read some of my notes
and I
and see.
apologize for the dog constantly barking today. He's been extra lately.
Yeah, it's all
He
right.
will not stop.
So it's okay. We'll deal with it.
So a couple things I wrote down. The whole thing of how intelligent life expands and distributes in the universe. So it predicts when we should expect to meet another civilization. It also gives us information on the chances of hearing alien messages and also becoming an interplanetary civilization ourselves. So that whole thing of we have to get through a lot of hard steps. So that just so the audience kind of understands why we keep bringing that up and why we're all having a debate about humanity, if we can even get there, is because I don't know how to explain this exactly. These topics are great, and it sounds awesome that we could eventually become, spacefaring people that move throughout the universe to discover these others, hopefully. Because it sounds like from listening to the folks that have described Grabby aliens that if we hear messages, that's not good. Like if we're already like the whole idea of us already seeing like these UAFs, UFOs, things in the sky, hearing messages is not a good thing. That means we're probably not going to survive. Does that sound about right? Like when they were talking about that, like if we could already see them, that means there's many other Grabby civilizations and we're too late.
Not necessarily that we're too late. It just depends. It would depend on how quickly they got here. Like if we could see them, we might be able to. But they're 10 million years away. It seems unlikely that we would get to the point of technology, but it's not impossible.
So, but going back to the tying in of the UAFs and people seeing these things, hearing messages, and they are like adamant that it actually happened. How does that tie into all this? Because obviously these civilizations would mean they're not Grabby.
It just depends on it depends on what you.
But they're advanced.
So if you take Hanson's approach, then he was saying that those would only be able to come from like if they're legitimately extraterrestrial, then it's a nearby civilization that is just more advanced than us, and that they would have chosen not to be Grabby because they would just be expanding and they wouldn't just be hanging out here for a second.
They wouldn't be like exploring.
His whole bit on it.
Maybe it's ethical grabbiness that kind of like when NASA was going to different planets, there was a really hard talk about should we actually ever set foot on a planet, because if there's any kind of microscopic life that's already developing, it might one day become sentient, and us setting foot there is going to introduce microscopic life, and we might completely eradicate what would have been in a billion years. Maybe in a similar fashion, they are Grabby, but once they find a planet that has life, they try not to interfere to the point that it would completely eradicate that life, because if you are a Grabby alien, especially the first couple other alien species you come across, it has to be like a miracle. You've been searching for how many billions of years, and suddenly you actually find an independently developed, like sentient.
But we would see them though. I think that's ultimately the point, is that we would see the light of the aliens.
But
if
not
they were
if they're.
Grabby.
But if they're not, but if they're not Grabby,
right?
And
if they're expanding as a whole, right, in every direction, then we would see the light of the other places that they've been.
Yeah.
Unless they're not really expanding and taking over, and they're just exploring and not really inhabiting.
Well, that's what Lex and Robin spoke about in the podcast at one point, that there's a potential that if they're like hovering right outside of visibility, that they're being careful, because it's like they don't know how that might affect us. Like they don't know how it would hurt us, how it could potentially destroy our whole planet, or it's like completely change what's happening. So these other aliens that might be exploring that are clearly not Grabby, they're obviously advanced enough that they're traveling and exploring in space, but they also might have been a type of civilization like what I was describing about the like our singularity or the awareness, that they are aware enough that not to mess with it right away, and they might just be studying what we're doing before they even trying to figure out how to communicate with us. They might not even understand. It's hard to conceive,
really. I mean, it's certainly possible that they just exist in an entire different intellectual concept, that they have concepts beyond what we could even conceive. And so, I mean, any way that they're acting may just be essentially beyond our comprehension, because we just don't know how they think. I mean, because we always think about life, intelligent life will exist somewhat like us, right? Be bipedal, have arms and legs and hands and that kind of stuff. But we don't know that's what other intelligent life will look like. What if squids built fucking spaceships and came out of the water?
Or snakes. I was just watching that
Galactic Space Travelers. I mean, not currently, but
right. Yeah, or if octopus were more social, and they lived in groups, because they're considered to be highly intelligent.
And they
Supposed to be
use
just
tools.
as intelligent as people. Yeah.
Yeah, and they use tools, so theoretically they could build something eventually, and then so you could have like an intergalactic being that, I mean, I think of like Futurama, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Wherever like all the different beings are just like all super absurd, like the yarn people, and then there's like people that are like shark people.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, like,
I mean, they do that in Rick and Morty too,
Yeah.
you know. But and you know
yeah,
what?
but we can
And now
see
and
like
then
intelligence,
I
you
can
know?
see the argument, like, why aren't they doing it while they're here? I'm like, well, if you think about the Grabby alien model, that they can't do that here because we've already done it. So now others like they couldn't become their own separate civilization because we've become Grabby with this planet. And now, and because we're at the top of the food chain, they
Well,
can't.
we might not be habitable to we may not be habitable to their species. Like I would assume, but then it's like it's how do you conceive what do Grabby aliens look like when it, and that's what that like that's to my point of like I don't necessarily believe that we will be able to expand as biological beings, right? So then what's the purpose of? I would see any Grabby aliens. It's got to be just about collecting information and resources, right? And then if you meet another equal civilization that's expanding the same way, then that's where the expansion stops, right? I don't. But that's it. I mean, it's all conjecture at that point, right? Like,
Yeah.
we're all just guessing about what they would or would not do.
Yeah.
There's no way to know what something massively more intelligent.
But we could take like lessons from our history, and again, it's kind of like we assume that aliens will behave and act like we do and think like we do, so we're like projecting our own understandings onto these things. But you could look at our history, especially with like colonialization, and that, you know, like some people who thought they were super advanced went to other countries with people that looked exactly like them, just with a slightly different skin tone, determined that they were a lesser species, completely took over their land, took over their resources, and treated them, you know, as horrible as you possibly could treat something.
Without hesitation, either, really.
Without hesitation. And only after all of these Grabby civilizations, you know, like started butting into each other, did we start coming under this idea of like a consciousness of should we as a nation be doing these things? And no is the ultimate answer. But it took up until we started butting into other people just as strong and we engaged in wars did we actually take a hard look at ourselves collectively.
Yeah,
and it took a long time because we were fighting lots of wars before we really decided to stop.
And we're still doing it, really. Like,
we're still not great at that. Yeah,
you really can't think of even. I mean, it's only within the last 100 years that there's been any effort to reduce the concept of imperialism or empires as a whole. I mean, you can't say it's gone, but it's only now that we've even tried to move away from it in our, you know, in our short existence, long as whatever you want to think of it. It's very insignificant amount of time that we've even tried to get away from it, and we may not get away from it. You know, there's other players that don't want to.
Yeah, it really is absurd. Well, I mean, I guess if more people could grab onto this idea, and if it's true that in 1.1 billion years we won't even be able to live on this planet, and I guess that's just a fact that they're going off of.
The sun's going to expand.
It'll run out of hydrogen.
And doesn't it like swallow us whole or something?
Yeah, it'll turn into a red giant, swallow us. I think it gets out to at least Jupiter.
If we make it 1 billion years without a catastrophic asteroid impact, we would be like the luckiest ever, because we've had like 6 within the past several 100,000 years of major impacts. So, I mean, 1 billion years would be a Goldie, like the best possible estimate, and I would say we are on this ability. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
But I mean, wouldn't that have to... Go ahead, Mike. I'm sorry.
That like, if we don't make it off within like the next 500 years, at least have some colony that's capable of reproducing and reseeding life, that we're going to be screwed, really.
Yes,
like,
that's what I was going to say.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Have you seen like Interstellar? Have you seen that movie?
Is that the one where they... Yeah, and they go to like different planets to kind of check out.
Study a black hole. And so that's that idea is basically they just took genetic material and launched it to a planet that they knew appeared to be potentially habitable, and then that device was supposed to reseed life on that planet should their other endeavors fail. And so, I mean, I think at the very least, if we survive 1 billion years, that should be achievable. You know, at least that part, even if we're not able to expand as overall, just like as a expanding sphere, I think we could at least launch some panspermia option off of ourselves.
Well, I do like the part when, Robin Hanson was talking about how as a civilization we're coming back to, he was comparing, I don't know if you guys listened to that in the podcast when he was talking about how we were foragers and then farmers, and then that's when everything got real fucked up with property and owning slaves and warring and everything. Ownership, that whole thing. And now now that we're getting very rich as a society, as a whole, that we're coming back to the more forager side of things. But it's like, I feel like, if that's...
Right, chosen difficulties as opposed to, like people that are choosing to take the harder route because they have an easier life.
Yeah. So, but I think it's just... I feel that with the way man operates as far as like making sure they have resources, making sure they have plans, and they can make sure they stay in somewhat of control as we run out of water, run out of food, and those types of things start occurring, because that's one of the biggest issues is like, yeah, it's really great to keep moving forward and expanding, but we got to think about resources. And I think that would be the push for some of the wealthiest people that have, the means to create the technology to start figuring out ways to get resources from wherever else we can.
I just don't see any sign that the super rich have any interest in sharing any of that, though.
Right, like next great builder.
Right.
Yeah.
Is it being able to share? Because, I mean...
What's the point of doing all that and then it's just them?
Yeah. Or, completely polluting the planet and stuff just for what did Hunter S. Thompson call them? Greed heads? People who think only of profit and care of nothing else. I mean, they don't necessarily serve any good
They don't serve a purpose.
Yeah. They don't serve a purpose, right? Or any good. I mean, if you look at the richest people in the world, I mean, they could give away 90% of their assets and still be fucking multi-billionaires.
Still the richest people in the world.
Yeah. So
and
I mean,
don't.
and the fact that they don't, I mean, and it's
Or
for no real reason other than just to be greedy, because they have no need to maintain all that money. They can't ever spend it all unless they just throw it away.
Again, playing a little bit devil's advocate here. It's just like, all right, it's been in a short amount of time that suddenly there's these people with this kind of money.
No, I definitely disagree with that.
Why? Like, because to the average people, there's been significant times where there's been drastic separations of wealth. If you look back at Rockefeller,
I was just thinking
go back to the Egyptian, and then even the Egyptian years. I imagine
their equivalent to today is still richer than Elon Musk.
Yeah, that's true.
It's just never been. It's look, money is power. Power corrupts.
Yeah.
There's just not a lot of way about that. I think it's ultimately the people at the bottom have to be willing to set aside their differences to get along, so that they can require the distribution of resources. I don't think we need communism, but I think that there needs to be kind of a smoother transition between the bottom and the top, and without the huge gaps.
Yeah, because I know. Well, that's why
it's just look, if you're making tens of millions of dollars a year, you know what? Your tax should be 90%, in my opinion. I don't think we should take all of it.
No, but I feel like you don't need that much. Nobody needs that much. Like,
right, at a certain point, and it comes back to those individuals
that are going to spend the money on you anyway. Because back to your company,
the infrastructure and the investments that get made. I mean, a lot of that money will come back as investments in the stuff that they want to do. Yeah. It'll come back, and they'll have to spend less of their resources on supporting their employees, right? Because if there's enough of a tax base to do something like universal healthcare, not even necessarily socialized, you can do universal without socialization. If they redirect some of their own resources back into society, I think that promotes them as well. It's like an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right? And if they're willing to put that prevention into society themselves, it's just like you pay for security, right? So that you don't have to deal with the problems of getting robbed and losing all your shit.
Yeah.
right? So it's just, this is my opinion, you know, like.
Well, that's why if you look at the whole, again, I go back to the Orville, because despite all the ridiculousness of that show, there had to be some things there that like make that even plausible. And
Right.
one of them was what they kept talking about is like, well, there's no money. We went away.
Past money.
Yeah, they got past money, and they had that whatever they created that just anytime you needed food or resources, you could just press a button and this machine created it. And everything went off a reputation. Now, how we get there, I don't know. But I'm like,
the
okay,
problem
that's
with some of those thoughts, though, and why I'll go back to why I think America has the potential to be left behind is that a lot of people see what you're saying as signs of the Antichrist and signs of the apocalypse. So it's to get like one world government, one world currency, all that kind of stuff. A lot of people see that as the ultimate evil and wrong.
But why?
Because they see that as that's the promotion of that's what the Antichrist will promote in order to try and unite the world and bring us away from religion. Exactly.
Their point.
I think it's possible that the people who were in power when the Bible was being rewritten thousands of times had that stuff put in there because they were like, well, this would completely ruin our like power base. So let's make this the worst thing that could possibly happen. You know, this is the Antichrist. You know, it's like all these good things. What's horrible about a one world government? You know, like what's horrible about everybody being fed and not going to bed hungry or starving to death or watching your children die.
Having a place to live. Everyone's comfortable and just
But it's the idea that it takes away, like, because just you even said it, right? We need to get rid of religion, but that's ultimately the view that causes that. But that's the view of people being afraid of you trying to take religion away is the problem, right? Because the religious people, if you try to tell them anything that contradicts their religious belief, or that their religion is wrong.
That's just their identity being threatened, and they don't know how to live with themselves.
But that's such a big part of their relevant to getting people to work together.
You can't just disregard.
How do you overcome some of those things? It's like the what we were talking about the other night, Wilson, about how some cultures have this interesting shared history where they only will have sex with women to reproduce, but otherwise they'll have sex with like little kids. And so little boys. And then it's kind of like one of those, like this is their religion, these are their cultural beliefs, but there's nothing right about that.
Yeah. But it's like you can't, it's always like, you can never take the approach of telling people they're wrong because that just causes people to dig in.
Of course.
True. Yeah. You automatically become defensive.
Right. And it hardens people's beliefs, right? So, I don't know. This is probably, I guess, a good as place as any to move towards our wrap up because it's good. I think if we're going kind of a downer route here.
It was about the if I'm laughing at my own jokes, there's trouble coming. So
why don't you give us your last thought, Mike?
Well, it's like maybe instead of being like, hey, stop having sex with these kids, we'll be like, hey, maybe having sex with kids isn't the best idea.
It can't be you fucking piece of shit. Like,
you're fucking garbage. And then your best case scenario is it shoves it underground. It doesn't stop it.
Yeah.
No, yeah, completely. Yeah.
You have to be willing to be like, hey, look, this causes this problem, right? And we want to solve this problem. This problem of you doing this fucks up these kids and creates this perpetuation of abuse. The problem is probably most of those people also went through the abuse as well. So that's to justify what they went through, they participate as well to be able to just, not collapse in on themselves. But
like the hazing mentality, I went through it. Why can't you? Even if while you're going through it, you're like, this is bullcrap. I'm abolishing this as soon as I'm in power. It's like as soon as you're done, you're like, everybody's going through this. Academia is very similar.
Absolutely. It's like
all about punishing those that in the way that you've been punished. It's hard to break the cycle. Hence, and it takes a lot of effort.
Why we gotta all go along with what the Dalai Lama has been trying to tell us for many years.
Screw China?
No.
No, I'm down.
He's like, well, maybe, but the whole idea that we're all one consciousness and we just need to learn to treat each other
it's the middle path, man.
as if we
No extremes.
I know, like be open to everything and attached to nothing, like
Buddhism at its heart. Right?
And that's why I do have faith in humanity, because more and more people are talking about this. And as I told you, I'll fill you in too, Mike, with the whole premise of the show is kind of the idea of just continuing to speak what we feel are truths for other people to hear, because the more people that say it and the more people that hear it, hopefully that helps us as a whole.
This certainly isn't where I thought our conversation was going to end,
Hey, well, hopefully. I mean, I think this is a really cool topic. I think it's really neat.
We're talking about the hard steps, right? The great filter, and how we can become one of these grabby aliens, So I feel like this is a beautiful place for it to.
Oh yeah, like if we want to become grabby, this is some of the shit we gotta fix as a whole, and
yeah, I guess it's a good final thought that if we really want to achieve our true potential, that we got to be willing to try to achieve our true potential and not get hung up on whatever else is holding us back.
Yeah, the minutia.
All right,
well, Mike, I really appreciate you joining us.
It's a good word.
I'm really glad that you were here, because I think you actually
thank you for having me.
Helped clarify a lot of stuff for us. So
yeah, we hope to have you as a future guest for sure, and so many more great topics in the future. I don't know what else we're going to talk about next. I don't think we've chosen anything, so stay tuned.
Yeah, stay tuned, and see you again. Also, please like and subscribe.
Yes, like and subscribe. Tell all your friends about it.
You can follow us on Instagram.
We're on Instagram now. I believe it is. Let me look it up so I tell you the exact handle.
So I guess I'll just keep chattering something so we don't have
for a second. There it is. It's this.could.go.either.way, because that was the best way I could do it. Sorry. Lots of dots.
All right, everybody. All right, Mike. Have a good day, and we'll see you later.
Peace out.
Later.